Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special, what are we calling this? Special meeting. Madam Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Mr. Jacobs?
Here.
Mr. Morrissey?
Here.
Mr. Schimpf?
Here.
Mrs. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mrs. Jewin?
Here. I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. The motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. Ms. Michelle, please take us away.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I know we're all excited to hear this yet again, but we've talked about some of these slides already this year. Certainly, those of you who have been with us for a while have seen most of this before, although we do try to add a few new twists every year. So I thought I like to start out talking about why we're here and why we are taking people's money. Most of us in this room that work for the city are here because we believe in the services that cities provide to their citizens. So our mission is to effectively and efficiently use the various resources of city government in order to make Waterloo the best possible place to live, work, do business, play, and raise a family for all our citizens. And that covers a wide range of expenses. It doesn't only include public safety. It doesn't only include leisure activities. It's a rounded mission to provide all the activities that we currently provide. About a year ago, I think, the city adopted some strategic plan goals, and the mayor and council did this. Goal number one was to support the creation of new livable wage jobs through a balanced economic development approach of assisting existing businesses, fostering startup businesses, attracting new employers, and cultivating an adequate workforce. Goal number two was to implement a community policing strategy that creates a safe environment in Waterloo. Goal number three, which we're probably going to focus on tonight more than some of the others, is to reduce the city's property tax levies. But then I think the next part's very important. Through a responsible balance of cost reduction in city operations and increases in taxable property valuations to ensure that Waterloo is a competitive, affordable, and livable city. And goal number four, to enhance the image of Waterloo and the city, both to residences and businesses inside and outside our community. We've been looking at this slide for a couple years now, and so I thought I would start there. This shows you that Waterloo, right, and this is according to the 2010 official census. There are other interim estimates that might change the rankings slightly, but according to the 2010 official census, Waterloo has the 5th largest population in the state of Iowa. Unfortunately, our taxable value at and this was a year ago, just under 2.3 billion, ranked us 12th of the largest 15 cities. So that's a pretty big drop between having the 5th largest population, but only the 12th highest amount of taxable value. And the taxable value is important because that's what provides our property taxes for the property tax funded portion of our budget. It also has a direct impact on our tax levy, and so our ranking at that time was 2nd highest. But again, the levy rate is only one part of a 3-factor formula, and I think it's important to remember that as we go through the budget. There are other ways to measure taxes by cities, and one thing that the Government Finance Officers Association encourages, and you will see in many larger cities' budget documents, is the calculation and comparison of taxes per capita, which means per citizen. Waterloo is actually rated 10th of the top 20. Bless you. We're right in the middle. And our taxes per capita are less than the average by about $46, or 7% lower than the average of the top 20 cities. When you look at taxes per square mile, which is also a significant measurement, Waterloo is, I believe, the 3rd or 4th largest in terms of square miles of the cities. Our taxes per square mile are actually the lowest of all the large cities. And that's important when you're talking about street miles to plow, miles that public safety has to cover in emergencies, those kind of situations. Another comparison that we often talk about is the city's borrowing limit. And the city of Waterloo is right in the middle. We're about 5th, right? The same ranking as our population. We have only used about 55% of our borrowing capacity, and we have another 44% available. Not that I suggest we use all that, but I think it's a good measure to know if there really is an emergency, the city does have the ability, should it need to borrow money. Another topic that we discuss often is our utility charges. So for sewer, water, and garbage, Waterloo again is the very lowest among the top 10 cities. If you look at city staffing levels, Waterloo is the 3rd lowest, and this is based on budgeted positions. So this looks a little higher than another slide that I often share with you about the number of positions that we have filled at any given time. But we're still 3rd lowest of the top 10. We have worked hard, and it's not an easy task to attempt to lower that tax levy rate over the last, I don't know, actually the whole time that I've worked here. Some years it bounces up, some years it comes down. But since 2012, we have dropped the most. There's only 2 other cities that have been able to drop their levy rates more than we have out of the top 10. So I think that we have been working hard to drop that rate. We also talked earlier about our valuation trends, and currently the city has about $3.89 billion of total assessed property value within the city. That doesn't include all of the nonprofit property. I'm not sure that the county has all of that in their system yet, but the taxable value is only $2.7 billion, and that's lower than the assessed, primarily because of the rollback factor that you hear us talk about. Our fiscal 19 valuations, the absolute assessed valuations actually grew by 1.55%. However, we had a 1.03% reduction in our taxable value, and that would be due to the rollback. And we also have $279 million of property value that's currently in TIF districts that we're using to pay expenses in the TIF districts. We also talked about this one on Monday, our change in taxable valuation by type, because especially when it goes down, we all want to know why, what happened. So with residential property, that's the top line on this chart, that fell 26.6 million. And unfortunately, I didn't get time to do this slide, but we finished a spreadsheet today that shows how much additional valuation we're adding due to the CLURA. And we are in fiscal 19 starting to see significant tax revenue coming because the first houses are now coming off their exemption period. I think it looked like it was probably about $100,000 in additional revenue that we picked up. So we are moving in the right direction there. There is more that will be coming on for fiscal 20, and I'll get a slide out talking more about that soon. Our commercial property fell 12.7 million. That's the orange line you see in the middle of your chart. Industrial property fell 2 million, the green line. And at the very bottom, you see a very short line. That's the new class of multi-residential. And prior to about 2015, that multi-residential property was categorized as commercial property. At that time, both commercial and multi-residential were taxed at 100% of their assessed value. So that's been a difficult thing for cities throughout the state of Iowa to absorb, as the state property tax reform brought in a rollback for the first time for commercial and industrial. And it also is on a path to have those multi-residentials be taxed the same as a residential property after a number of years. We're on a sliding scale going down from 100. This year we're at about 78.25% that's taxable. So all those together, unfortunately, created a decline this year of 23.6 million in our taxable property. One of the things that has been happening over time, and we started this, I'm just comparing 2014 to 2019. In 2014, just over half, or 56% of our property taxes were paid by homeowners. So nearly half was paid by commercial and industrial properties. That is something that has been changing because of the way the state has worked the rollback factors. Now residential pays 61% of the total bill. Commercial industrial Commercial pays about 32%, and then we have some utilities at 4%. And we have the new multi-residential, that new category that's paying 3% now. So I know a lot of people assume that all their property taxes get paid to the city. And we've talked about this slide for many years, but whoops, I lost my captions. There they are. So the city of Waterloo, actually, when you write out your check to the treasurer for your taxes, the city of Waterloo gets about 44 cents of every dollar. The school district gets about 37 cents, the county 16, and other agencies about 3 cents. And that, we calculate that as of June of 18. We don't have all the rates final yet for this year. I get questions a lot about how property taxes are actually calculated. And this is where things get a little complicated. There are lots of parties that are involved in this. The county assessor is who actually sets the value on a given property, and that's called the assessed value. They're trying to make that value be a market value. It theoretically should be about what you would sell it for, and I know there's often differences. Then the state has a role. They set the rollback, or the percentage of that total value that becomes taxable. Another piece. So now there are two pieces that we have absolutely no control over. The state occasionally, every other year, can issue equalization orders if they feel that property in your county or your city is not being valued properly. We have not had one of those for quite some time. And then, so by the time we get done with the assessor, the state setting the rollback and equalization orders, then we find out what our taxable property is, and we set our portions of the levy rate. So the state has decreased the residential rollback for the second year in a row for fiscal 19. So for fiscal 19, only 55.62% of a home's value will be taxable. That's a reduction of 2.32%. And that shifts the property tax burden back slightly to commercial properties. And it's interesting that residential property values, the taxable portions, have risen 15% over the last 7 years. During that time, commercial property values fell 10%. Again, that was because of the property tax reform law. And the commercial rollback remains at 10%, while the residential rollback actually declined 2.3% for fiscal 19. So then I put in an example of how to actually calculate the tax bill on your home. And I won't walk through the whole thing. I'm just going to jump down to the city portion of the tax bill. And for fiscal 19, and this is the first time, actually, in all the years that I've worked here, 17 years, this is the largest reduction we've been able to do for residential property. The proposed budget before you would reduce a homeowner's tax bill by 1.41%. A commercial property will increase less than 0.9%. And that's described a little bit further on this next slide. You can see the total property tax askings that are being requested are an increase of $33,673. That's a 0.8% increase, very small, even though the rate does jump from 1760 to 1776. And again, that's why all those pieces of that formula are important, because the tax rate is only a piece of the puzzle. And the multi-residentials, again, are the biggest winner this year, and they will continue to be for some time. They saw a reduction of 3.66%, or will see that if this budget's adopted. We're often asked how we spend that money that we collect in property taxes. So we did something a little different this year, and we broke out the tax levy by some of our major programs. Police and fire take $12.14 of the levy, and that's after revenues that they receive directly in their departments, or 68% of the property tax dollar. Our debt service levy, and we did reduce that this year, $2.98, or 17% of our total levy. And then, as you all know, we have two special voted levies of 27 cents each. One for the Grout Museum, that was relatively new. I think last year was the first year. And the library. So all our other services together get $2.09 of the total $17.76. On the next slide, I broke out the other parts. And I pulled out some general revenue, which would be things like gaming. What else is in there? There's one more. Utility franchise fee. So trying to get the costs aligned a little more closely. Building inspections and EMA, I probably should have spelled out, that's Emergency Management Association. That actually, building inspections returns revenue. They generate more revenue than they use. We generally figure they cover the planning office as they work together very closely. The Public Works category, and that includes things such as the airport, the Met bus transit system. That takes 77.5 cents of your tax dollar. Human Rights is the only department we really fund under Health and Social Services, and that's 11 cents. Culture and Recreation is our next largest category after Public Safety at $2 and just under 32 cents. And those taxes fund the library, all of the culture and arts activities and budgets, and the leisure budgets. Community and Economic Development and Planning and some other things fall under that, takes about 12 cents. And then our general government, after pulling out the general revenues, is $1.97. And then I backed out the general revenue, the state rollback replacement, and the fund balance. And that brings us down to the 209 that we saw in the previous slide. I think another common assumption is that your property taxes pay all the city's bills from a lot of people, and I think it's important to remember they really don't. This next slide, and this is calculated based on the fiscal 18 numbers, but property taxes really only pay 29% of everything that the city does. There are other city taxes such as hotel motel tax and local option tax, licenses and permits, interest revenue. We get some funds from the federal government, of course some from the state government. About 90% is charges for services or user fees. Debt is a chunk, 12%. That'll be lower this year. We had an extra issue last year for the Tech Works Iowa Reinvestment District project, and TIF revenues at about 5%. So what do all my property taxes pay for? And we've been talking about this, but I threw in debt service. This is just the expense side of the equation now. But police, fire and building inspections are about 65%. These are the same, roughly the same proportions we talked about earlier, just kind of showing you in a slide the pie shape to give you that visual of what it takes. And you can see what we do. And I did include debt service in this slide. Sometimes we have not included debt service. We've only talked about operating money. And when we do that, obviously, police and fire is a larger percentage of the pie. But when you throw debt service in, it's about this 65%. Another common question is, how do we spend the money? So about 48% is on personnel when you include debt service. 18% for debt service, 27% for all our contractual things, 6% for commodities, 1% for other. And debt service funds are used, we will be paying $11.8 million is what I'm projecting to pay in principal on the bond issues in fiscal 19, $2.8 million for interest, and then we pay $14,000 to administer that. And that is all the formal presentation that I'm going to have tonight. You also have other handouts that I'm just going to talk about for a minute. I gave you a budget fact sheet that hopefully will summarize some of the important things if you get questions, talking about our property valuations and what our tax askings are, all those kind of things, number of employees, and then the Excel for the budgets for both the general fund and the other funds. So I would be happy to entertain any questions.
Good. Michelle, do you know, is this on? Yeah. Do you know what other cities are doing? Have other cities adopted their budgets, and are they increasing, decreasing? What's going on?
Many of them are increasing, not all of them. I did notice Sioux City and Council Bluffs are both having sizable levy rate increases. I think Sioux City was 50 cents or more, maybe. And Council Bluffs is substantial as well. So even with this increase, we'll probably still be, it may still be the second highest levy rate. And I would expect our tax burden actually might fall. Because we, although it looks like the rate went up, we have actually held down our tax askings.
Thank you.
Questions for Michelle, presentation? Yes, sir.
Michelle, I've asked you this question before. Can you tell me what each penny of that levy rate equates to?
$22,691 this year.
Would you repeat that? 22?
$22,691.
Yes, sir.
Michelle, what, in terms of this proposed budget, what amount are we including in revenue in terms from the state rollback money?
This proposed budget does include all of it, and now there has been a bill introduced in the House that would also begin reducing it, so that will be something that'll have to be considered.
Do you have any
now or later.
projections or any, from what you know, what amount would the state be looking at, or this bill be looking at reducing the rollback money to Waterloo?
It appears that the Senate and the House may be both trying to reduce it for 19 by a third. That would be about $450,000 to our operating funds. That's a sizable piece.
How much again?
$450,000.
And if we approve a budget prior to knowing what the state's going to do, we can't change our levy rate. Is that correct? We would have to find another funding source to make up that difference?
Once you pass a budget and once I walk it across
Yeah.
the street, it's done. Yeah, and we can't increase it any higher than what it was when
Yeah.
we published. Now,
Yeah.
we're significantly lower than that today,
Yeah.
so you could, there is some room in there if you want to raise taxes to cover that.
Thank you.
Michelle, what's the total amount of rollback money that we've got in this projected budget?
About 1.7, I think. And that includes some with TIF, which I don't usually discuss because it won't impact what we're doing here. So it's 1.339 are the amounts that affect what we're doing. And so if about 100,000 of that probably would come from the debt service fund. I do have enough fund balance there, I think, to compensate for that, so I'm not as concerned about that share of it. It's the general fund and the employee benefits levy funds where I would be concerned about replacing that money. So it's about 350,000 that we need to be concerned about.
Are we prepared in that sense because we've heard different stories from the State House, so
We always
what
do.
if are we prepared then if they decide to take 2/3 away in July of this year?
We are not. I certainly hope they don't leap to that conclusion. I think we're all pretty anxiously waiting for tomorrow's revenue estimating conference and to hear what the latest update is. The bills that I've seen, the governor's bill has it funded at 100%, or proposal, I should say. The Senate bill reduces it by a third, and the House now has come in with reduces it by a third. The House's bill, if I'm interpreting it correctly, it does reduce it by a third the first year, but then the later reductions are less and it stretches it out longer. So they are working things. I would hope that a third is the most that we would have to be concerned about. But of course, you never know what could happen.
Correct.
And then on that last, I think it was year 4, I think they left a standing appropriation again of about $25 million to be dispatched back to cities somewhat. I don't know how much that would be, but they did leave a standing appropriation there as well.
Michelle, one follow-up question. Sorry, Chris. What amount of our reserve money is allocated into this current budget as revenue?
$500,000. That's the same amount we've budgeted the last several years. And unfortunately, as everyone's budgets get tighter, we have a harder time coming in under that. We typically, our departments do a really good job of watching their budgets, and we typically will not use all that. But again, as we keep shrinking, we shrink two things happen. We're shrinking their budgets, and cost of business doesn't typically go down, so it's getting more difficult to make that up through operations.
Other questions? about the
Michelle.
Presentation? Yes, sir.
So that 22,691 per penny, does that number change as you move away from 1776? Or is it always gonna be $22,691 per penny, no matter what the levy rate is?
Should remain 22,691. The things that are affected, the rollback replacement number changes, so that becomes kind of a circular calculation to get it right down to the penny, which I do here, but we don't have to for purposes of discussion.
So okay. So I guess what I'm doing here is I'm taking 1776 times 22,691, and that comes out to, maybe my calculator's broke here, I guess.
Well, you're probably not factoring in the debt service levy.
Okay.
And the debt service levy, because debt service levy picks up all the TIF valuation, so it gets more. And if you flip to page 4 of your general fund Excel, there's a lot of good information buried on here, but, oh, I guess I don't have that. I believe for debt service, it's about 25,000. It's a little more than 25,000. 25,214 is the number that comes to mind, but that's only for the debt service levy. The rest of it is the 22,691.
Okay.
So hopefully your calculator is not broken, and hopefully mine was not broken.
Okay, that's what I was
And
doing.
I mean, I did run it, I do always run it in the state forms, so my tax calc, I think, is good. I'm comfortable with it.
Calculator, maybe not, but I can't say the same for my brain.
Especially at 6 o'clock at night.
Question? Yes, sir.
Michelle, on page 3 of that general fund, 5-pager or 6-pager, under state replace, at the very bottom, you said 1.7, and so could you explain what those last 3 lines there are? Because it says 1,338,000 for the proposed.
Right, the 1.339 is only the portion, that doesn't include the TIF fund portion. That's why I said I don't typically concern us with that here. So it's the 1.339 is what's budgeted, that we would potentially lose approximately a third of that. And I mean, there's another complication with trying to calculate that. The state froze the amount that you can get statewide, and so our portion depends on our evaluation, how much it either went up or down in comparison to all the other cities across the state. So I estimated initially to get 97%, and I don't know how accurate that is either, but it was the best that I could come up with.
Thanks.
And Michelle, didn't you say that's also based on what what we adopt as our tax levy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the lower our levy, the less
the
we
less
get.
you get, which is why it becomes a circular calculation so when you're deducting an amount, you know, let's say we're gonna reduce expenses by 100,000. It ends up being more than that because I have to reduce the backfill, which is why I just need some time to run numbers if we choose to do that. Nothing can be easy.
Michelle,
Yes, sir.
are you going to get into the weeds about the proposed budget that we have on the agenda here? I mean, are you going to get into the different reductions that there possibly are for the different departments, or is that something that, Mr. Mayor, we're going to be talking about up here?
Yeah, once we get into the public hearing, we can answer some questions if you have,
But Michelle will be available to answer those questions as well.
I hope so.
I think I'm off the clock now. I'll try.
That's leaving, right? Stay close.
Happy hour is not over yet. Any other questions about the presentation?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to receive and file proof of publication of notice of public hearing.
A motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The hearing is now open. We've had a presentation by Ms. Wiedner with regards of the overall city coffers, but it's your time if you would like to ask questions that you may have about the budget as well. So if you want to come forward, state your name and address for the record, and let us know your thoughts thus far.
And just to note too, we do have comments on file. They're attached in Novus. We had a couple emails regarding the library budget.
You attached this?
To Novus.
Oh.
And a phone call too, right?
Mm-hmm.
David Dreyer, 3145 West 4th Street. We keep hearing about other city comparisons, etc. When can we start being our own city and not worry about what they do? That's number one. Number two, we also hear about we were going to, and I think this has been something that Mr. Mayor, you ran on, was that you were going to look at the entire structure we have and start working on reducing our department heads, et cetera, to save some money. I'm thinking that if you got rid of get rid of is the wrong term, but reduced the number of department heads by 5, I'm guessing that they're 100,000 plus jobs. That's $500,000 right there. We don't have to tap our other funds. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Forrest Dillawoo, 1725 Huntington Road, Waterloo, Iowa. I would like to speak not with questions, but with comments. I would like to comment about the utilities franchise fee. When we are, I'll use the word taxed, we are feed with the franchise fee. Some of us pay that fee many times over. Number one, we pay the schools, because they have to pay the franchise fee, so we have to pay more to keep the schools at the same level. Our elderly are going to have to do the same. Low-income renters, if theirs are paid by some organization, that organization is going to be contributing money to the city. All of the Black Hawk County properties, everyone they own, is going to have to pay that fee, which is in turn paid by the same people, the taxpayers, the citizens, and the businesses. Country View out there, struggling desperately, probably going to go down or have to be sold. They're going to have to pay that fee. And like the TIF dollars, the city gathers, gathers up all of those dollars and keeps them in their coffers for their business. But the rest of us, we pay every turn of the way. Not only do we pay at home, we pay every place else, the stores we go in. You know, and we see businesses going out every day, and we sit and feel horrible about it. You know, drive down University Avenue. It's just getting bare. We're doing something wrong. We're getting more tax dollars than almost any city. We're spending it all. Something is wrong with the formula. The money seems to be dribbling out. With all the taxes we pay, we should have the best streets and the best buildings in the state. But we really don't. Look around. I don't think we really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Sherburn, 1715 Robin Road. As Forrest just got done talking, it was making me think a little bit, but Country View, some of these other things that we've got, not counting Country View because that's not ours, but I always hear this, we'll sell it. And then whoever buys it can make money. Now, that sticks with me because, number one, if they can make money, why can't we break even? You know, we've cut a lot of places. We always hear we're bare bones cut, but maybe that's not the total way. I mean, I hate paying taxes as much as anybody, but maybe a little reorganization or something. You know, we've cut our funding for cleaning. Okay, the cleaning suffers. you know, a lot of places, but it's got to be done. But in turn, we still pay some company and somebody's making money off of that, but the help isn't. So our, you know, this hurts our wages. So I don't know. And sort of like we hear bonding for the police cars and the miscellaneous repair and tons of other little things. And I always hear this, well, we pay that off faster. I'd really like to see how that works, because if you borrow money for 15 years, I think that, I'm not sure, but I think you have to probably wait 15 years to pay it off. Does that pay out just like a car loan, or how does that work necessarily? There's a lot of places that we will spend a lot of money, and debt service is, you know, that's a ton of money. And when you add that too, if you take the debt money out of there that we're paying in for interest and bank services and a bunch of other stuff, that's a big chunk of money. That's at least one fireman or one policeman or somebody to that effect. We need to relook at everything we're doing here, not just rubber stamp, let's cut right down to the bone, because, you know, it's like our street department stuff. There's work that needs to be done there, you know, but we need to change a lot of procedural things. So this is going to be a tough year for a lot of people, because we've got some pretty good ideas. You've got some pretty good ideas. We need to implement some of this stuff instead of just talking about it. And number one is, you know, we hear how good Cedar Falls or how bad or Cedar Falls or whatever. We don't need to compare. The guys that I know were successful in business don't give a rat about the guy next street, down the street, or someplace else. They take care of business here. And I think that's what we need to do is, you know, maybe we need to concentrate more on ways to make money as well as ways to save it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mike Spence, 4042 Jill Drive. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm also the Union President for Waterloo Professional Firefighters Local 66. In 2017, Waterloo Fire Rescue responded to 11,027 calls for service. That was a 4% increase over 2016 and a 13% increase over the last 5 years. When I started in the fire service in 1997, the staffing levels for the Waterloo Fire Department was at 124. By 2002, our levels had decreased to 118. Today we sit at 109.5, and we've got 4 positions open. Budget cuts and shrinking overtime budgets have caused Station 6 to be closed on a regular basis over the last few years. In 2017, Station 6 was closed for 60 days, and it's been closed for 31 and a half days already in 2018. This is causing longer response times and is putting both citizens and firefighter lives in danger. When Station 6 is closed, one call in that territory affects the whole city. The trucks and the ambulances that cover the other areas of town are now leaving their territories unprotected to respond to calls in Station 6's territory. Therefore, that's leaving the citizens in those areas waiting for a delayed response for incoming units to come from other areas of the city. Waterloo Fire Rescue has a great group of men and women, and we're here to serve and protect the citizens of Waterloo. How can we keep up our high level of service when our manpower continues to be diminished? No matter what, we'll continue to put in 100% effort into all of our duties, but the bottom line is that with reduced staffing and browning out of Station 6 is only making it harder and sometimes impossible for us to achieve the excellent care and services that we strive to provide our citizens. Engine 6 is an advanced life support engine. It's got all the capabilities of an ambulance, and having Station 6 in service and staffed with a paramedic saves lives. In the event of a cardiac arrest or somebody who stops breathing, there can be brain damage from a lack of oxygen in as little as 4 to 5 minutes. Engine 6 responding to calls in their territories will buy valuable seconds to that person who's having a medical emergency. I can't emphasize enough how seconds count, whether it's fighting a fire or having a medical emergency. Our association remains concerned that further staffing reductions will cause unsafe conditions for the public and our firefighters.
not making any cuts to our staffing level is critical. And I ask that you work together and come up with a way to maintain our current staffing levels. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Going a second time?
I thought Pat wanted.
The council comes next.
Okay. Okay. Make a motion to close hearing and receive and file oral comments.
Second. A motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried.
Okay. Make a resolution approving the fiscal year 2019 budget with a total tax levy rate of 17.76290 and property tax askings in the amount of $41,134,775.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made with the second. Council.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to have us go through, I know the other night we got handed this two-pager for, and this has not changed in the last 3 days?
No, sir. I didn't bring mine.
Which page are you talking about? Well, that was more than 2 pages.
No, it was 4 pages front and back, 2 pages front and back.
I didn't bring mine.
But I did not bring copies, but that's roughly the same. Couple little tweaks to some minor corrections that we needed to make to numbers, but it's basically the same document.
Were any of the tweaks, Michelle, reductions?
No.
Okay, and on these, with the different headings here, building inspection, human rights, all the way through council, how many of those were, or had reductions in them?
Well, okay, so everything on that sheet that had items in the expense decrease column, so every positive number in the expense column is a decrease. Every, in the revenue column, are you talking about just expenses, or do you want to talk about revenue too?
You can do both at the same time.
Okay, so the revenue, if that was a decrease, that's showing up in parentheses in the revenue reduction column.
And if it was an increase, it
It's
would be just
positive.
plain
number.
old, I
Mhm.
mean,
So-
we
so
don't
building-
got plus or minuses here.
Right,
It's either parentheses or no parentheses, okay? And then you follow what's above on the,
yep,
top
the
line
heading,
there.
yep, mhm.
Okay, so like human rights took a $6,700 decrease,
That's correct.
okay? And building inspections, as you said, was, the revenue was additional to that to $20,000, $21,000 about.
Yes, and I think those were both, if I remember correctly, those are both impacts of 2.5% to each of those budgets.
Okay,
We
and,
primarily worked with the 2.5% options and the 5%. There were a few other changes, but mostly departments either took 2.5% or 5% changes, reductions.
okay, so hypothetically then, if, as an example, let's go to human rights. If that $6,700 decrease is a result of a 2.5% or a 5%?
I think that was two.
Fairly certain that's 2.5%.
Okay,
I
okay,
will double check here in a moment.
okay.
I have the sheet too. Is that it? Is that what you need, Michelle?
I don't think it's got the percentages of it,
Okay.
unfortunately.
And Michelle, just going down through this, if that's the case, then when we come to the police and the fire, the public safety departments, we have the police showing like $48,000 in reductions. Plus also there's a reduction in the revenue estimate for their ticket. When you combine it with an increase in ticket revenue on the next line, you're probably $48,000. So would that mean that that total is $96,000 reduction?
Nope, that actually means their particular budget has a zero change. We're reducing their revenue and their expenses, and it nets to no impact on the levy. So basically, police took no hit in this budget. Net tax askings.
Cost of business went up, and they absorbed.
Correct, that's correct.
They absorbed whatever the cost of business changes were.
And that's aside from personnel in that department, by the way, Mr. Morrissey, so that we didn't, they had personnel increases that remained in the budget.
Okay. Okay, just the parentheses, I think would throw anybody off as far as where they are and what they mean. When you're talking about revenue
right,
decrease means that the revenue's going down.
Correct.
But then you talk about an expense decrease. Okay,
Because they have to work opposite, right?
It
It is confusing. That's why I put them in separate columns. Otherwise, I get confused when I'm trying to post the changes.
Okay.
So that's why, because an expense reduction makes costs go up. I mean, a revenue reduction makes costs go up, and expense reduction makes costs go down. So they work opposite each other, and that's why I put them in separate columns on here to help us all track that, because it is confusing. I agree with you.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one in fire.
Yes.
It looks to me like there is a reduction in staffing of 214,000, which is, how many positions is that?
I believe that's 2 positions.
Okay, so public safety has taken a hit
2 positions, yes.
this budget, okay. And going through this, any place where in the expense or expense part there, or revenue decrease, if you figure it just like we did with the police thing there, we're going to be able to see where the reductions are coming in the mayor's budget, correct?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay, and health insurance adjustments, there weren't any?
No, so when we started this process this year, I estimated a 5% increase in health insurance costs. I'm hoping that will work. It's gonna be close, it's gonna be tight, but if we have a good year, we'll be okay.
Okay.
And so the reason you don't see an adjustment on that line at the bottom is because we have not adjusted that through the process. A lot of years, I like to watch that month by month. And when we get to the end of February, now we're at 8 months of the current year. So I have a lot better idea of how we're doing for the year that we're in. This year, we're right at budget, a little lower, and we also now have information on our renewal that we didn't have 2 months ago. So that's why I feel like my calculations are right on the money, and I don't think there's any need to either reduce or increase them at this point. And that's why you don't see any adjustments on that health insurance row at the bottom. I use that we just recently met with our health insurance carrier, for example. So if I'd have gotten bad information from them in the last couple of weeks, I probably don't have time to spread it among all the departments, and you would see a change on that separate row. But I haven't had to do that this year.
Okay. I may want to ask some questions again, Mr. Mayor, but for now, so you can go on to somebody else here soon.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So my question on the 0.5% franchise fee increase, I believe, if I remember right, the last time we did a franchise fee increase, wasn't that a separate vote from council? So if we were, let's just say hypothetically, to approve this 1776, would we have to come back and make a separate vote on the franchise fee increase? Or would it just automatically be implemented?
I believe you would have to come back and vote on that.
So then if we approve that and we came back and voted and that got turned down, then what would happen?
We would have to make adjustments to the budget in the amount that we don't receive.
So we'd have to pull more out of the reserves, probably.
Not necessarily. You have options. You can take more out of reserves. You can reduce some departments' budget, or you can find other revenue increases. I think that probably covers the universe that's available. But you would have to do one of those things, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, part of the question is, there's a lot of talk in these chambers about our property taxes being too high. So that's the question. We can use $450,000 and raise property taxes, or we can use another revenue source, of which the utility fee is one that's available to us. And that's a choice to make.
I just wasn't sure on how that process actually worked, because I know there was a separate
question.
vote last time, just to make it clear.
Yeah. Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So just to back up a little bit, we got together as council and we made our strategic plan, and in end of fiscal year 2022, we compromised as a group and we came together and we all said that we would support. It might be funny to some people, but we said we would support $16.50 as a levy rate. I don't think it's a laughing matter, personally.
I don't either.
Okay. And so we come to budget time, and this kind of gets all pushed to the side. You know, the council kind of sets the direction of the levy rate, and we expect the administration, the department heads, to find ways to help us get there. I don't think it's our job to find out what we're going to cut. And I don't think you want council doing that. So in the budget presentations, I heard very little talk about we found this efficiency or we cut this cost over here, knowing that our strategic plan knows that we have to cut about 22 cents a year. So we should be, in my opinion, if we're going to get to $16.50 by 2022, we should be about 17 or 18 tonight, if my math is correct. And so maybe we can't quite get there, but that's what we should have been looking at all year long and been aiming for and talking about all year long, and figuring out ways we could be more efficient, as opposed to reasons why we have to have this, and this, in my opinion. And so the other thing is the franchise tax it's really a tax that, it's a very regressive tax, in my opinion. It hits the people that can the least afford to pay tax. It hits, you know, it also hits the lowest wage earners. It also hits the nonprofit agencies that really don't have that in their budget to pay additional franchise fee, and when they pay their electric bill. So it's kind of going around the whole levy rate issue, saying that, hey, well, we're not going to raise taxes, but we're going to call it a fee instead of a tax. I just think it's a regressive tax, in my opinion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I read the goals that were established by the prior council. And my understanding is that the people from UNI that came to help you work through that goal-setting system of meetings that you had were paid people. And so we hired people to come in here, and you all went through this process. And hopefully you had predictions about what was coming down the road. And all of you had some opinion about your ability to do the things that you set for goals. And so here we come today, and it's a complete abandonment of a goal that's very young, which shocks me. I think we need to hold with the goal. If work has not been done to reach that goal, then let's get cracking Also, the tax on the utilities, the gas and electric. You know, we're just taxing too much in every way. We've got to stop because it doesn't fix the fundamental problem. So I do not support that tax. And as far as you asked that we had a special date to get our suggestions in. I submitted 13 suggestions. I don't see any of them in the budget, and I never got an explanation back as to why they might have been rejected.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to address the comments about the goals and the levy rate, and certainly appreciate what my peers were saying. But we have to remember, as Michelle was saying, the levy rate is just one part of the tax asking. It's also based on the evaluation and based on the rollback, items of which we really have no control. And so if you're going to look just at the tax levy, you can't do it in isolation. This year, our valuation went down through no fault of our own because of the state rollback. We have to factor that in, and it's not fair to just look at the tax asking. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Some cities looked into the future and saw that there was a very dangerous thing going on, counting on backfill money that was very unsteady, and they pulled out a couple, 2 or 3 years ago. Those people had presence of mind and foresight. We just keep limping along, hoping we're going to get the money. It's sort of like monopoly money. It isn't really real. I sometimes wonder what a banker would think if we went in to get a home loan and we said, well, this is how much we make, but we're hoping in a year to get a better job and make more money, so can we have a bigger loan? We would be laughed out of the bank.
All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Well, just to address a few things here, I know that several of us on council were at the strategic session, and I don't recall it the same way as other people do here. I know the 1650 thing was brought up by people. I think that's in certain, I guess in financial things, if you don't have some flexibility in what you're doing, you're painting yourself into a corner you may never be able to get out of. And when we had that discussion, I was totally against any kind of arbitrary number, as you know, I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, and as other council that were there know. But what was added to that was that balanced approach, that if there is going to be reductions, it has to be accompanied by revenue, an increase in our revenue base. That was what the discussion, that was what I voted on in agreement with. If that was possible through those different revenue enhancements, revenue additions or increases that needed to take place with that. With that in mind, you know, I, along with the council person from Ward 1, I had submitted 4 different proposals and other things in addition to that, and I hope that we have time to discuss those. I hope the council person from Ward 1 has that opportunity. I'd like to hear what she had to say as well. But one of the things that I know, if you call around to other cities, which I have done since we started talking about the budget, is that other cities with their local option tax make use of that local option tax for reduction in debt, in their debt service. And as an example, I just want to give Dubuque, because I know Dubuque is mentioned on different occasions by different council people as something that we should emulate in regards to some of the projects and programs that they have, some of the things they're doing there. Dubuque uses 50% of their local option tax towards their debt service. If we were to use just 25%, which I know that requires a referendum, but we could do that. We could do that now, and we could have it on the ballot this coming November. 25% of local option tax and Michelle, you correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but if, say we have $10 million collected in a local option, that's $2.5 million. And I know that a council person from Ward 2 had talked about lowering to $1,650. If we were to do that right now, do you know, if we were to use 25% of that, if my numbers are correct, we would be below $1,650 if we were to use that for our debt service levy. Now, how many people on council are using some creative use of their minds in order to come up with some different solutions? That's what I believe that we're charged with, Mr. Mayor. That's what I've been doing, and I hope that I'll be given an opportunity to throw open my proposals before we come to a final vote here.
I mean, if you got proposals, put them out to the public now. I mean, what are we waiting on?
Well, I did.
Let me hear. I'm not just directing to you, but let me hear the proposals.
Well,
It's your floor right now.
okay.
Let me hear what you submitted, and then you can go as well.
Michelle? Please correct me if the stuff I'm doing is way off base, okay? But okay, so, and I had submitted these and given them to Michelle this past Monday, but I had four different options to look at here. And I know that some council have already spoken to the whole concept of fees and that kind of thing. I believe that the city of Waterloo needs to provide for itself and give the citizens of Waterloo the services that they deserve. I'm not in favor of any reductions, and so I took my proposals off of the base of 1819 as we were given quite a while ago. Correct, Michelle? Okay. And using each penny as $22,691. So I added to that, using that base rate where there were no reductions, to use $210,000 additional from the general fund balance left over from the fiscal year 2017 fund balance that was not used, in that $500,000 at that time. Increase the Mid-America franchise fee from 3 to 4 cents, which throws in another $900,000. And I know there's some adjustments for revenue that Michelle had talked about of negative $286,000, and that would bring the levy rate down to $17.82. Second option was using the base level, again with number one above, but I would add a 1% increase to all property tax affected fees and permits except golf and sportsplex, which would bring in another $66,618, lowering the levy rate to $17.79. The third one would be to add, do number two, except add a 5% increase to all of those property tax affected fees and permits, bringing in $333,000, which would bring the levy rate to $17.67. And then my final was number three above, except increasing the Mid-America franchise fee to 4.25 cents and property tax affected fees and permits to 6%. And that would add another $66,000 and increase the following. The library get an additional $75,000 for materials, which Steve Nielsen talked about the need for money to be provided for them to get materials. Increase the legal department by $20,000 for a needed boost in what Dave Zellifer and that department are faced with. Increase human rights by $20,000 for their staffing and reductions in their staffing. Increase planning and zoning by $25,000 for economic development upgrade, and $25,000 additional to planning and zoning for something that has not happened ever in the city of Waterloo, and that's providing the Historic Preservation Commission with money to do surveys, marketing, and other essentials. And then two other things, code enforcement $75,000 out of sanitation funds, making the part-time person a full-time, and adding an additional part-time worker, as was addressed by Maria Downing when she was here. And finally, $100,000 for the facility specialist and finance positions. Doing all that with what I said would lower the levy rate another penny to $17.66. But additional to that, I believe that we should be exploring and making a decision by June 30th on the possible use of any other fees within Waterloo that the city of Waterloo has just not taken a look at yet. Second thing is seek signatures for a referendum to take place in November of this year, that election, for the city of Waterloo to use 25% of the local option sales tax towards debt service, such as Dubuque has done and other cities have done. And that would be effective 7/1/2020. And then the next thing would be that would be effective 7/1/2019. And then join with other cities in demanding the state legislature either permanently supply cities with the backfill, which we're hearing tonight probably won't happen. But then I think we need to make a plea to them that if you're going to backtrack or you're going to back out of a promise that you made to the citizens of Iowa and to the legislature at that time, if you're going to back out of that, then you need to rescind the corporate tax cut law that you passed that was contingent on those backfill funds being given to the cities. Because what is happening at the federal and the state level is we're seeing a reduction in taxes and we're seeing it passed on down to the local level. And I could get into a political argument over that, but that's not political, that's fact. Next is to make use of a certain agreed upon percent of TIF monies. When doing so, will not jeopardize acquisition, infrastructure placement, development, marketing in the TIF districts. Next is approve a use, and I know the police department doesn't much care for this, but approve use of advertising on city-owned vehicles, possibly bringing in about $100,000. And I do need to add that my proposals 1 through 4 are based on a 100% corporate tax backfill, but I know that we have the means to go about and deal with that depending upon what the state legislature does, to me, in a lack of unwisdom towards the cities in Iowa. So that's mine, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
And council, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, first I would like to say I found that very interesting, and that's the kind of thing I think we've been lacking. I would have loved to have seen Mr. Morrissey's proposals prior, and I learned a lot, and there's even 1 or 2 things in there I might agree with. But now my ideas are much more simple. I'm brand new, so this is trial and error here. My suggestions were a $17.17 levy rate. My next suggestion was counting on only 1/3 of the backfill money as the bills presently in the House and Senate are proposing. My next item was close, mothball, and prepare to sell South Hills Golf Course because the tastes for leisure in the United States are changing and we are losing money on our golf courses. Let us go with the current and new desires of the citizens. The next thing is close the most underperforming municipal pool. I do not know which one that is, but again, the tastes of the citizens are drawn more to the Birch program out there. And I don't think we should compete with private business. There are lots of creative ways to encourage leisure in these spots. Also, my next item was no work for the county in any department until our work is done. And when we charge the county, I suggested that we charge them cost plus 10%. I also, because I asked every administrator that stepped up here, and the only one I didn't get back was the waste program, as to how many people lived out of town. It is astonishing how many of our employees do not share the tax sacrifice that we share. So I would institute an 8-mile residence requirement from City Hall. And then I think that our administrators should all 100% live within the city limits. Also, I would freeze overtime. I would do a moratorium on hiring. I would advance no part-time position in town to advance in hours or wages. I would not do an increase on the gas and electric bills. I would combine departments in a restructuring effort, which I think is critical. I think that is the core reason we're sort of at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to high taxes. I would also use interns as often as we could. A good example of that would be in tech work on our Facebook and website. Instead of hiring people at a high wage, I would try for interns in that area to see if they don't want to do the work and learn a little bit and get credit for that. And those are my ideas.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I just want to address a few of the things that were said. So I would be in favor of switching around, looking at that local option tax and how that's used, but obviously that's not something we can address here this evening. And the reason Dubuque probably does use it for their debt limit is they have the highest debt on this slide that we provided here at nearly 85%. So they probably should be using it for their debt. The other thing is the utility franchise fee is not actually cents, it's per cents. So it wouldn't just be cents, it would be a percent that we would be raising on that. I just wanted to address those.
Mr. Mayor, maybe the city attorney can address this. I had an understanding, perhaps wrong, that by Iowa code, we cannot require people to live within the city limits.
We have critical employees that have to live a certain distance or time frame from the city of Waterloo, and that's written into our policy manual.
But doesn't the state code say other than those critical positions, we cannot require them to live in the city? Isn't that correct? Is that correct?
But yeah, you can go. But I mean, that was a suggestion or an idea. Sure. That's something that can't happen right now. So those are things that we can take a look at. Part of the strategic plan also talks about ways that we can try to get people to come back to live within the city of Waterloo. But just
incentives.
Yeah, we might want them to, but yeah.
Pat Treeler, Fire Chief. We've addressed that in the past, and Iowa Code 400.17 does not give a city the ability to restrict residency to the city itself if they're a civil service employee.
Am I correct in thinking that mile radius, a certain mileage, without using the phrase you have to live in the city?
You bet. The code lists a reasonable distance. Okay. And currently
for
right now,
positions though.
Yeah,
right?
for critical positions. So right now, our policy is 10 miles from City Hall, currently.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
You know, in the 11 years I've been on the council, I've made a number of suggestions, recommendations. Some were thousands of dollars, some would have been millions of dollars over some period of years. But, you know, it's what both Councilman Morrissey and Councilman Klein have mentioned, that it's then having the willingness to embrace those recommendations. And in the 11 years I've been on the council, that willingness hasn't existed. I think Councilman Morrissey and yourself were probably the only two on the council in 2016 when I did this PowerPoint, and I happened to stumble upon that as I was going through some of my notes. And you know, there's a whole lot from 2016 that's right here again today, that we need a lot of things, we want a lot of things, but we don't have the financial ability to provide everything. And it seems to me the majority of the conversation that's been going on here is ways to raise more revenue. And I remember when I first came on the council, the mayor at that time said, boy, if I could just figure out a way to get more revenue, my life would be a whole lot simpler. And I said, you know, in the private sector, we would certainly look at raising more revenue, increasing our revenue, but we'd also look at cutting our expenses, figuring out what we could do to be more efficient. And that seems to be the thing that's lacking. You know, something just as simple as this recent dust up over this position down at the central garage you know, a year ago, that department head, who no longer is with us, but he was a great department head, said that I think we were 2,000 hours behind on our maintenance, and it was suggested, why don't we look at outsourcing that just to get caught up? Why don't we look at outsourcing that to take the pressure off, to make sure we don't have any vehicles that end up going to waste because they're not being serviced? It seemed like a pretty logical, reasonable suggestion to me, and apparently it was never acted upon because nothing was ever done about it, and then that led to this recent episode, which I think probably never should have happened. You know, we've talked about things like cross-training and things like what other police and fire departments are doing throughout the country, but we never get to the point of really looking hard at it and saying what would work in Waterloo. We just keep doing what we've been doing, and so we're going to keep getting what we been getting. And I'm very troubled that in our budget this year, we're looking at basically $500,000 in reserve money, which again, in my world, budgeting out of your reserves for your budget is not good business practice in the private sector anyhow. But to do that, that's $500,000, and then $500,000 in utility fees, that's $1 million. We're talking about basically over budgeting, but then we're going to tell people we're actually lowering the budget. We're actually lowering your taxes. I mean, it's just incredible to me that we would try and present this way. I just think we need to get a whole lot more serious about this. I very much like several of Councilmember Klein's suggestions, and I would look forward to a proposal somewhere along those lines to support rather than the 17.76 that does not address the $500,000 in utility fees. So I don't know that that's really even a viable number to begin with. So those are my thoughts.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a brief comment, if I may. The mayor has established our reorganization committee, and I'm really hopeful that some of the comments you've been making and suggestions is something that we can look at a little more in depth through that committee.
Mrs. Klein.
You know, people always, there's two ways of looking at things, cutting and then growing the base. I hear that phrase all the time, grow the base, grow the base. A utility increase is going to just stifle the base again. I mean, why would we do that when we're trying to attract business? I just don't understand that. Seems direct hit.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Well, in answer to the council person from Ward 1's statement just finished, is that there are 192, I believe, municipalities that make use of the utility franchise fee, and I believe that we are one of the few. I think there's 42 or 43 that are at the top. All cities are allowed to have 5 cents on the dollar to go that in that direction. We're at 3 right now, and we've been at 3 for a while. And I know that it was talked about last year and discussed last year. This year is a different animal, but when we've got cities close by us that are making use of that utility franchise fee, that was put in there for a reason. It wasn't put in there for cities to not to, if they felt that they were in need of looking at additional revenues that they would not use. So it's something that can be utilized by municipalities across the state if they chose to do that. And I don't see it as it's stifling anything other than giving us another source that we can go to. The coffers of the city, it's not like a family or a family's budget. They have a job, they go do, they bring home, they try to make as much money as they can to satisfy the needs of their family. And they have other means in which they hopefully and other avenues they can go down to try to increase their revenue to pay for the bills and pay for things that they want in the future. The city of Waterloo or any governmental body is quite a bit different, and how they have to operate within the confines of how they create the revenue in order to pay for the services that the citizens have not only wanted, but they deserve and they need to have. That's what we're here for. And we're here to look at all the different avenues that we have, which are fewer than if you would consider what a family budget is and all the different things in the private sector. We're the public sector, you know, and hopefully we're going to have more public-private partnerships, and there's some ideas out there that I believe that we should look at in the future. But for right now, we got to take care of giving the citizens of Waterloo what they deserve. And a reduction in any of those services is, in my opinion, humble opinion, a complete and total abdication of what we need to give to the people of Waterloo.
All right. Other comments? Well, I just, it's kind of interesting. I asked for some suggestions, and I'm not even at the point where I am going to say who supplied what or who didn't supply anything. I've had a couple conversations. The door has been completely open. So a little challenged by some of those areas that were discussed. I received anything from increases in every fee and over $1.25 for the utility to no increases at all. So I tried to come in between and gather thoughts. I've heard of no reductions and increases to shared sacrifice. So I tried to come in between some of what council was saying. I'm hearing do not touch public safety, and then I'm hearing touch public safety. So I tried to come out with something to try to hear and to try to get a pulse of what we were hearing. We are internally taking a look at reorganization, and there's a couple of you here that know directly that can attest to that. But I guess it's a public meeting, and folks aren't going to say that we're actually trying to work together to address some of those areas. But this is, there was a report that was given a little while ago about the type of cross-training that was mentioned a little bit earlier, but nobody mentioned that report. There was a report that was done by staff talking about the cost of outsourcing and in comparisons. So to say that I haven't directed folks to do that, I'm a little bit challenged by that because all of that happened publicly. Another thing, it is, and it goes along with the job. There were some departments that had a 5%, some may have more, some may have a 2%. Some of them had to make up revenues or become general fund neutral. I took a lot of suggestions that people have. You just may not like the way it looked. But as far as dollars, I took a number of different suggestions. So, it is what it is. It's up to council's discretion what you choose to support. But to say publicly that I haven't taken on any suggestions or haven't had my door open, that's absolutely not the truth. But whatever it is, but also we also have to remember there's a reality to the decisions that we make. So yeah, we'll probably get a levy rate set. But there's no way as policymakers, all of you are going to abstain from having the consequences that come with some of those challenges that go along with that. That's why we're an elected body. So I appreciate all of your input. Hopefully we can come to some type of agreement on something tonight. But I just want everyone to have an opportunity to express themselves and know that your concerns were heard. I just tried to come to somewhere kind of in the middle to lose 26. So with regards to the strategic plan, great progress in all the areas. The challenge is to get to 1650 this year. By 2022, I'm optimistic if we're not there, we'll be close with some of the recommendations we've heard this evening. But There also, so the public knows, there's also a portion under that strategic plan, since no one is reading that, it says, property tax levy rate less than $16.50 per 1,000 by July 2022. It also states that cities' taxable property valuations increased by $250 million by 2022. It also states that residential property valuations increased by 20% by 2022. So the city of Waterloo, by no fault of ours at all, no fault of the council, no fault of staff, with residential property values, took about a $26 million hit, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if those numbers are wrong. With regards to our commercial taxes, what was the commercial $12 million for industrial, or was it manufacturing? And then one was a $2 million, 12.7, and a $2 million as well. So there's other factors that are involved in here. So, I mean, you know, hopefully not falling on deaf ears, but there's a combination of factors that work. I'm not retreating away from what we worked to do last year, but there's a number of factors that the public need to know happens as well. Each department, I believe we had a slide where there was 2.5 and 5% askings and reductions. The departments gave the staff impacts, and they did that. So to say they weren't working with less when you have to reduce the amount is a kind of interesting challenge. But we have a rate on here that we need to vote for so we can all move on with our lives. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say that in speaking to the resolution in front of us, I'm opposed to that resolution, and the primary reason that I'll be voting no on it has to do with the reduction in the fire department by 2 jobs. I just can't agree to that. They've taken a hit in the past. They haven't even got back from where they were 3 years ago. So I just wanted to let you know that, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. All right. So we have a motion for resolution approving 2019 budget with the levy rate of 17.76 and property tax askings in the amount of $41,134,775. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Jacobs?
No.
Mr. Morrissey?
No.
Mr. Schimpf?
No.
Mrs. Klein?
No.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
No.
Mrs. Jewin?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I think that's it for this evening, right?
Mr. Mayor, could we take a recess to have some of us talk for a minute, if that's possible? Yes, it'd still be dealing, I mean, we're come back in maybe 5, 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd prefer to, I mean, I don't, doesn't bother me how long we sit here and work and figure out a budget tonight. I'd prefer to get it done tonight.
Do those that voted against this budget have a motion to make for another budget?
I mean,
And be
anyone
specific on what
right now,
happens?
if you got a second, you can come up with something. But does the council want to take a recess?
Yes.
Yes.
Then somebody make a motion.
I'd make a motion to recess for 10 minutes.
Second.
The motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Opposed? All right. All right, so I was told that we didn't need any more time, so if someone wants to.
Motion to reconvene.
Second.
That motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are reconvened. There's some manna that fell from the sky, and the heavens opened up, and
Mr. Mayor.
We're all in agreement.
Mr. Morrissey.
Well, I know that I had conversations with the councilperson from Ward 5 and with the councilwoman at large about trying to come to some kind of compromise, and I guess that's dead in the water.
Oh, all right. Yes. All right. So we want to adjourn.
I have a motion to make.
All right. Let's hear it.
I make a motion that we go to 1717 on the levy rate, that we remove 1/3 of the backfill money from our figures, and that we do not advance the utility fee at all.
All right. So what would? So within the 1717. Oh, yeah. You need a second.
Second.
All right. So if you want to repeat that again.
I move that we go to 1717.
Just the numbers for me.
1717 on the levy rate. Remove 1/3 of the figure of the backfill from our budget considerations, and no advance on the utility fees.
Mr. Mayor?
Hold on. Now the question I'm wondering, what are they moving that from? Because you voted down what was proposed, so you aren't able to use that. So it's from 1818 to 1717, and then add to the 1717 $450,000.
And the
So-
third of the backfill.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor?
Let me just calculate that first, buddy. Please. 18.18 minus 17.17 equal times 22,691 equal. Oh no, that can't be right. That can't be right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to recess while Michelle Wiedner, Chief Financial Officer, gets the numbers together so we can hear them. And also, secondly to that, Mr. Mayor, just a point of information, I believe that with the council person from Ward 1's statement, that is a brand-new motion, and it can't be an amendment to your prior motion.
Right, that's what I was saying.
Okay. So there's no figures, no numbers, nothing for us to go on, and I would want to see all of those as far as what it does to each department, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Does anyone entertain a recess so she can at least figure out what the numbers are?
I'll second.
All right.
Would a half an hour be okay, Mr. Mayor?
How much time?
How much time you need, Michelle? A week? February 20th or so?
No, Mark, yeah.
March 20th. So
Or do you just
about,
want to set a time?
okay.
Would that also give everyone an opportunity to tell us how you would implement that levy rate?
Council, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Jewin, are you asking for the council person from Ward 1 to tell us
How it'd be
how the
implemented?
across-the-board cuts? These are across-the-board cuts, I
don't
would
know.
imagine.
Right now, let's just, we got a motion for a recess. All in favor? We'll go
Aye.
to 7:30, 7:35. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in recess.
Motion to reconvene.
Second.
Motion been made with second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Like to make a motion to recess for another 15 minutes.
Well, till she gets done.
Till
Or
Michelle,
if there's some more talking you want to do, that's fine. We'll just say, what do you say, 15 or 10 minutes?
till 5 minutes to 8.
Maybe ask Michelle how much time.
Michelle, you need about 10 minutes maybe, or a little bit more. We'll say 10 minutes.
We don't know. We just don't know right now.
10 minutes, Pat.
Sure, for 10 minutes.
Second. Motion been made with second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, let's get started.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Motion to reconvene?
Second. That motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have a motion on the table for a levy rate of 1717 plus $450 for the state rollback as well. Not filling that.
And, Mr. Mayor?
Mhm.
And it also included not advancing the utility at all.
Well, that's off
That's
off
yours.
already.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But, Mr. Mayor, if I might ask of the mover of this, if I could get specifics on this to take a look at, and how much would be with the 1717 from 1818, which I understand if there's no backfill, that 1818 is not even a proper number.
Michelle, what is that number? What do we estimate that number to be?
The loss of the backfill, the loss of the backfill.
Plus the 1717 levy.
The total of the two would be about 2.76 million.
So, Mr. Mayor, with that, I'd just like to go through these and have the mover of this proposal answer these for me, for my information.
Why don't, if it's possible, Mr. Morrissey, if she so chooses, just to explain, because it may not be something on that list, it may be something else, but I think the mover needs an opportunity to explain in her format. In her format.
And then ask questions after that. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, if the question is posed, how do we arrive at 2.761, 2,761,000 or a 1717 levy rate?
One of the things that I learned attending the League of Cities meetings, which the city asked us to go to, was that we are not to micromanage in any way. We are not department heads. We are not the mayor. We are simply the big picture organization. And so I have outlined the big picture. I will leave the development of that to the administrators.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
As well as from the League of Cities, what I learned that micromanaging has to do with doing the job of different departments or supervisors. That's what micromanaging is that I've always learned in the school of thoughts that taught me the stuff that I know to this point in time in my life. And what the city council, one of our main directives, one of our main duties is to come up with a budget every year, year in and year out. And part of that budget, if there are cuts or if there are advances, is outlining where you want those cuts and advances to be. So my question is not out of line whatsoever, and it is not micromanaging. I want to know what departments are going to be cut, or if this is an across-the-board cut. And if there are certain departments that aren't cut or are cut, I believe that this is the time to have those outlined, not after the fact.
Well,
Mr. Mayor.
You've asked your question. It was not answered in the way that you would like it to. You know, I would have to work with staff to come up with 2.7 million, and that includes losses in every department, from police to fire to every department. There will be some losses in personnel. That's the only way that we can make up that type of money. So those that advocate for police services, that's, I think, forgot how much money it is on the unfilled positions. Fire, that's all of them. That's basically the elimination of all the unfilled positions, plus some internally that we'd have to take away as well, because we also I also have to back out of the monies for the backfill too. So that's how you get there. So I'll say it. And as I said, we're the folks internally that do it, but we're going to just cut positions.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I did have one question. My understanding is the budget that you proposed is no longer in effect, and we would revert back to the 1818. But
Right.
my question is, the 450,000 that is being talked about, will that actually put us above our published rate levy?
If we just eliminated that revenue and didn't do anything else, it would, but we can't go above the published levy.
Right, I understand that. So that was my question is by eliminating that 450, is that going to actually put us above the published rate?
If you eliminated the 450 revenue and you didn't make any changes to expenses, it would.
All right. So we.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So if I heard you correctly, if this was to pass, it would affect all departments, including public safety, both police and fire.
At least.
For sure, it would.
There is no, I don't even know what to say. It will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there would be cuts to public safety.
There would be cuts and there would be layoffs too.
And there would be cuts to the library.
There would be cuts to all general fund departments.
Okay.
So we have a motion on there. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey?
Absolutely not.
Mr. Schimpf?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Amos?
No.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mrs. Jewin?
No.
All right. So probably the biggest surprise of the night, I have a little bit of literature for the council.
One second.
I just want to read, please, dear council, please consider this letter as your notice that I am exercising my veto power under Iowa Code 380.5 and 380.6 with regard to the budget resolution of 1717 passed during tonight's meeting. This decision does not come easy because I sat in the same seat that you currently sit in. I respect your input and the diversity of perspectives that exist with council. As mayor, I see the opportunities for progress and have a deep understanding of the challenges we face as well. A budget is an evaluation of our priorities, but should be developed with input from those that are policymakers, those that pay for services, and staff that provide critical services necessary. With that said, there has to be a careful mix of spending and savings. The budget proposal that I laid before you had a mix of items submitted prior to the budget submission period, with careful concern for other impacted areas that may lead to diminishing our overall effectiveness as a municipality. Over the last several years, as a councilman and as your mayor, we have worked to impact the levy rate and the overall cost of living in the city of Waterloo. Some may say that there has been no progress, but we are second or third in the top 10 cities in decreasing our rate overall the last several years. We've made strides where we have made great strides from where we were at years ago, but we have so much more to do. This has even happened with the inclusion of a citizen-approved levy increase of 27 cents from the Grout Museum. The reasons for the stated veto: 1, the city of Waterloo has the third lowest amount of FTEs from the top 10 largest cities in Iowa and is nearly at the top with square miles to serve, so the majority of our budget is staffing. Number 2, our overall budget has some factors that are outside of our control, such as property values, rollbacks, and valuations, but we are still legally required to provide services. Number 3, the budget that I proposed provided a mix between council members' suggestions and offered one of the largest residential decreases in the last 7 years. Number 4, the current budget rate passed under the budget resolution impedes the city of Waterloo from adequately providing the level of services necessary and deserved for the citizens of Waterloo. Number 5, the budget resolution could potentially hinder our ability to meet the growing demands of federal and state regulations such as EPA, IDNR, FEMA that are nearly certain to come. It is more cost-effective to have adequate staff to meet those needs. Number 6, the level of funding under the budget resolution could have a significant impact on public safety and similarly related departments. And to quote Major Libo, the police departments depend on all other city departments to ensure the safety of our citizens. I ask that you respectfully support my veto based on the outlined factors and our ability to move forward. Madam Clerk,
What's this?
this is to veto the 1717 rate that was just presented.
There's no vote to be,
There's no,
there's no vote to be taken on a veto. So you've now handed out your notice that you're vetoing the adopted resolution. So at this point in time, if the council chooses to do so, the council can take a vote to override the mayor's veto. You need to have a 2/3 majority vote to override a mayor's veto, so that would have to have a affirmative vote of 5 members in order to overturn the veto. If the veto is overturned, then the resolution that was adopted becomes effective immediately.
And if the veto, excuse me, if the veto is not overturned.
If the veto is not overturned, then we're back to where we were before. We'd have to have another motion to adopt some sort of budget.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is if we don't overturn the veto and we don't approve another motion, then we revert to this year's total dollar amount for the budget.
More or less, we revert to the property taxes for this year's budget. That doesn't work for the utility excise tax, so we would actually receive about $18,000 less than we're getting this year in the combined property taxes and excise tax. And the rate would actually probably be about $17.64 or something like that.
Okay.
all right.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to override your veto.
Your second. All right, so now what?
There's no second, then the motion fails, or the motion dies due to a lack of second.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I hate to say this, but I'd like to take another recess to be able to talk possibly with the councilman from Ward 5 about trying to see if we can work out a compromise here. If that would be acceptable, to take a recess of about another 15 minutes.
Yeah, I want to go home.
I think we all do,
You got a
Mr. Mayor.
motion for 15 minutes?
Recess, yes.
You got to make, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
You got to talk, well, you don't have to talk to him, but we have 15 minutes, 8:30. It is 8:54. Would
Motion to
someone,
reconvene?
Second.
a motion's been made with the second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Can we hear the most recent tabulations for,
If I understood Mr. Morrissey correctly, that would put you at a levy rate of 18.1187.
I thought
you say that
number
again,
was
Michelle?
supposed to be off of
18.
Mr. Mayor's.
you added positions, though. I had
Yeah,
positions out.
I
Original.
started with
Oh.
1776 and added back what he added.
It doesn't seem like it worked out right.
Well, you're
But then he had
right.
to
No, we did that wrong. God, for crying out loud.
Motion to recess.
No, just wait a minute.
Dang it.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it's getting too late for me. Quiet.
Mr. Mayor, you want me to go over that again? So Michelle, I know Michelle's got everything there.
I've got it.
Because, Mr. Mayor, I had put in there not just the 2 fire positions, but the library, human rights, and then there was a 210,000 from the general fund balance and the 5% at 330,000. So there was an additional 540,000 put in there, you know, from your levy rate
It
budget.
should have.
So,
Should have more than offset.
It should have in a perfect world. Let's try this. How about $17.40, 17.4070.
Okay. So a levy rate of 1740.
Yep, 4070.
so at this point in time, I'd like to make a motion to,
Question before, can I ask a question about that?
Yes, ma'am. There's already, he already motioned it. That's how we were able to discuss it and have her calculate it. Yes, ma'am.
Does that include raising the utility tax, the fee on the gas and electric?
yes, that would be included in that. Yeah.
And it includes the full backfill amount?
If that's part of the mayor's budget, yes, at this point in time.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
And that also includes taking 200 and some odd thousand out of the reserve fund, correct?
No, 500 carryover.
That would be out of the reserve
Yes.
fund.
Yeah, he's correct.
That's what we call
Is
the
it out
reserve
of
fund.
reserve? If
It is.
Carryover goes into reserve.
That's right.
Okay.
We're pulling out of 3 different funds.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, so Councilman Morrissey, can you talk about the 5% increase? Is that every fee across, like permits and all?
It's
Explain a
fees and
little more.
permits that go into the property tax that's paid out of property taxes only. It does not include the golf, nor does it include the sportsplex.
Electric, doesn't it?
Pardon?
I believe that wouldn't include the electric, because the electric was 450,000.
That's separate. That's a separate,
So
that's a
this would not
franchise fee.
include the electric franchise fee.
The franchise fee is in the mayor's budget.
Okay.
Okay.
But at 0.5%.
0.5%.
At the 0.5%, correct. Not at the 1% that I had put in my other proposals. No.
So to Councilman Jacobs' question, what fees are those? I mean, we're talking building permits, I would assume, right? And
Let's see.
It's a laundry list, Mr. Shimp.
It does include building permits. There's, back at the top here, there's a number of licenses that are handled by the city clerk's office, cigarette licenses, peddlers. I won't read every one.
You want to read everyone?
Then you've got another large one. There's some in the police department, copier commissions, for example.
Mr. Mayor?
Let her finish, please, and then I'll come right back to you, Mrs. Klein.
It would involve raising parking rates, planning and zoning, they have applications and other fees. The fire department has things, copier commission, hazardous material fees, ambulance fees, and I did a very rough calculation, so some of these are not gonna be able to be done. For example, with ambulance, there's a lot of things that were already at the Medicaid and Medicare limits, so we wouldn't be able to actually achieve that. Culture and arts and leisure, tennis fees, swimming fees, all those kind of things. Ice rent at Young Arena. It'd be a wide variety of items.
Yes, ma'am.
I just can't support hitting our citizens like that on every fee and small tax and odd tax. I just can't support hitting them like that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to lay this on the table and adjourn to another time specific.
I'll second it.
All right, so,
can we make that specific as to like Monday night then, so that we can finish on after, make the last item on the agenda for Monday night? Is it too late to do that, Kelly? I know
Well, we
there's,
could have a special meeting at 4.
but what's to
So
say
we
that
may not be done.
we may
by-
not be done?
We may not be done
I mean,
by
it would,
5:30.
yeah, it would have to be the last item on the agenda.
Yeah, I'd go along with that, Mr. Mayor.
We could go earlier in the day too.
What, changed the meeting time to earlier in the day?
You could have your special meeting earlier in the day on Monday, and then have the council meeting in the evening. Or we could just do it at the end of the council meeting too.
Could we move the council, can the council meeting start earlier than 5:30?
Nope.
Yeah, good.
I would,
You just heard the city clerk just tell
City
you
clerk who reads the
directly and the
codes.
attorney, we're not, the 5:30 is, that's our time frame.
the last agenda item to me sounds like the best at this point, Mr. Mayor.
So you,
What about a special meeting earlier, and you would also, you could adjourn and also put it on the council agenda for a later item if you don't get done earlier, if you don't want to go later in the evening. I don't know what works better for you.
So like
So we could have a special meeting early in the day on Monday.
starting at like 1 or something?
And then we could also put it on the agenda, or something on the agenda to know that we're going to talk about the budget at the end of the council meeting.
So what you're saying
So-
is, oh,
Basically, whatever we put on the special meeting agenda, I would also put it on the regular agenda so that you have a backup in case we're not done.
so if we didn't come to, if we had a 1 o'clock meeting, we didn't come to a consensus, then we would be, we could finish it up, and if we did come to a consensus, we could just remove it from the council agenda. We would just have an amended
Yeah,
agenda.
or if you're not done with the special meeting, if it changes from what we have on the agenda in the special meeting and we get to the regular meeting, we can do an amendment to the agenda to put on where you guys are at the end of the special meeting on the agenda. Then that way you can start where you left off.
My only concern would be is Mr. Jacobs, I know works, I do not work on Monday. As if,
I think we should be considerate to our members. I don't mind going late.
to, what, tonight?
I don't
No,
mind
that-
going late tonight. I don't mind going late Monday night. But I think starting earlier impinges on their work, on your jobs.
so the last agenda item, let's put it up front. I'm just playing.
Better yet, Mr. Mayor, I give a suggestion, just put it on the consent agenda. Just kidding. Then we can have that
Let's
argument.
meet without them.
You had,
We can have that argument all
You
over
had to
again.
go there. Okay, so we'll put it on as a last
So-
agenda item. We're just flirting with being able to get that process by Thursday. So,
So no special meeting earlier in the day on Monday? Is that what
I
I'm
mean,
hearing?
we gotta, if folks can't make it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Could you make it?
Mayor,
I just need to know how we're going to word this motion when you guys take a vote.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Kelly, could we just work on it now?
Why don't we just work on it now and get
We
it
don't
done?
have,
Yeah.
we don't have the numbers.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
We completely have them. We can do.
There's a motion on the table to
Lay it on the table.
To lay on the table.
until-
And adjourn.
Lay on the table.
And adjourn to
till
Monday.
Monday.
It's just a matter of when on Monday.
It,
Let's get it over.
So we either need to have a date for when we're going to adjourn to finish off this motion, or the motion should be withdrawn
it would have to be the last item.
on the regular agenda.
Yes, that would be acceptable to the motioner.
Into the second.
He can,
Okay. Should we do a roll call?
Madam Clerk?
So we're voting on laying it on the table until,
Yep, so the motion on the table is to lay on the table the resolution that puts the levy rate at 17.4070 and take the item up at the end of the regular agenda on Monday.
Yes.
So, Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mr. Schimm,
No.
Mrs. Klein,
No.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
No.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs.
No.
All right.
Fails.
Now we
Mr.
have
Mayor?
yes, sir.
Could we discuss Councilman Morrissey's motion and just see where that might take us tonight?
So we have
Since we're all here.
We have a motion and a second for Councilman Morrissey's proposal already. So we've had comments already. I think Mrs. Klein had comments. You have some comments, sir?
Well, I'm all for, like I said, staying with our strategic plan that we came out with and we all supported and came together as a group and had consensus on. And so I think we should talk more about that. If there's a way to get there, I don't know why we can't try to negotiate something. We've had some headwinds with reduced valuations. But with that said, I don't know why we couldn't try to negotiate something in a common sense way. With that said, I think it's pretty evident we're not going to get at least a third of the rollback money, or at least odds are we're not. So we should probably plan responsibly to remove 1/3 of that from our budget. And I think probably our CFO would probably agree with that eventually. And I'm not so sure that we're so sold on the franchise tax. But outside of that, I don't know why we couldn't come together and try to figure something out here.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Were you done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I believe there's also an issue of taking some money out of the reserves that some of us are not going to support.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I would like to see happen is if we end up falling back to our old levy rate, I would like to know what the impacts actually are going to be behind that old levy rate, from a standpoint of whether you're talking staff reductions or whatever it is that will impact, because I heard over $1 million. So
that's easy. We just won't fill any unfilled positions. We'll have to think of some other folks that may be out of work. I mean, everyone here is seeing the financial state. For folks to even think that there's fluff in these budgets now, after all the detail we looked at, then that's something. Department heads have given their 2.5 and their 5% impacts. They've done things differently with less. So we're talking about jobs right now. We have 4 police positions that are on there. We have 4 fire positions that are on there. We have a medical supervisor who has to direct the different EMS staff to be able to go out to find out what services need to be done for people that are in health situations or crisis. We have those. We have a slate of positions in there. They won't be filled. That's the choice. That's the choice that the decisions have left us with. All that conversation about trying to do something a little bit differently at this point, we're talking about positions.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Morrissey.
Well, I just wanted to say that I brought forward, go ahead.
And another thing, when you take a look, everybody talks about the levy rate. The levy rate right now was proposed at $17.76. Over $12 or so is specifically for police and fire that no one wants to touch. The other part was $3 for debt service, and the last part of it was a very slim portion of other services provided. So there's been ample time. So folks just need to say exactly, we can spend this whole night doing this. Folks need to say exactly what they want to see gone. And then you have to answer to the public for it. Mr. Morrissey.
I just wanted to say that we as a deliberative body come in here and this is our most important thing that we do. Quite frankly, I mean, there's other issues that come up that are very controversial, as you know, and we have debates over that. We deliberate over what we feel is best for the city. And there's nobody here setting up a council that does not want the best for the city. It's just a matter of our philosophical approaches to that and how we see best to do that. And so I came in here tonight with an open mind even though, you know, I was dead set against any, and I still am dead set against any fire positions being closed down, being shut down. And so, you know, I looked at yours and I did not agree with it for that, and I voted against it. And then we come to Council Person Klein's, and I just can't deal with that one and agree with that one because of what it does, in my opinion, to the city of Waterloo. And that's no deference, or not deference, but I'm not in any way disparaging the council person from Ward 1. So then at that point in time, to me, it's incumbent on not just myself, but other people on council to try to come down to some kind of compromise. And what I had there was, my lowest one was 17.66. Yours was 17.76. There's 17.17. So now I have proposed something here that lowers that about right in the middle to 17.4070. And that's not through mirrors or any kind of smoke. That is actual stuff that the chief financial officer is saying can be done with those numbers. These fees have not been increased in a long time. And we're not asking per se that any particular citizen to, we're not pillaring citizens by this kind of a proposal. We're saying this is a way to get revenue, which is one part of our strategic plan, and the other part is to lower that levy rate down, which is consistent with what the majority of 4 that voted for 17.17 said. This, to me, is a compromise, and it keeps public safety where they're at now, while at the same time giving human rights some money that they sorely need, and it also gives the library some money because they're not going to be cut. That's all I'm saying. I'm asking the council, come on. Compromise is what we're all about, and I'm proposing a compromise.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
My whole campaign this last year was to ask the people of my ward what they thought the biggest problem in Waterloo was. I said, give me a couple of ideas. What's your 2 major things that you see wrong? Taxes was overwhelmingly number 1. And I had widows, 2 widows, one by Blessed Sacrament Church and the other one out in Audubon, who told me that this spring a for sale sign will go up on their house because taxes are too high and they have lost their spouse. I also know that after our first foray into this budget system, when our chief financial officer only mentioned 1818, a house on Woodstock went up for sale because that was printed in the paper and they were done with the taxes. So my position is this. As I drive home in Ward 1, I see the lights on in those houses, and those are the people who are listening tonight. And they said to me, no advance on taxes. It looks like I'm not going to be able to keep my promise of lowering taxes, but I sure will not let them down by voting for an increase in taxes. So there's my compromise.
Please go ahead.
I'm confused. I didn't think the 1740 was an increase in taxes.
So
That's
It's an
still a
increase in,
reduction.
you can call it fees, you can call it anything you want, but it's still taxes.
So this is
Okay.
so it's an increase in fees, but fees are considered taxes, right? But we also have the lowest fees in the entire state of Iowa. So do we have the highest or do we have the lowest? That's always the question. So if a fee is a tax as well, and we also have lower fees in other areas and per square mile, that adds up. So I'm just saying, when we say that, take that into account. Mr. Morrissey, your proposal is your proposal. That is fine with me. I don't vote. I can veto, but I don't vote. But any other conversation before we vote this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to reiterate, what Mr. Morrissey said about we're all here for the ultimate good of the city, and it is a philosophical difference, and it's just that simple. And it goes back to what I said about that PowerPoint I did in 2016, and I think the citizens have been watching. I think the citizens have been paying attention, and I think that's why this council is the council that's now seated, and this council is the council that's going to make changes on how we do business. We've identified over $2 million in unfilled positions. Now, I know all 2 million of those do not come out of the 810 levy. I know a large number of those positions are critical, but those are the kind of things we need to be sitting down and taking a look at. And I think the compromise is reverting to last year's budget. And then we, as a council, will be looking at every item that comes through finance this year. And we might want to take a look at making all 7 council members part of the finance committee so that things don't happen when one of us is not here. But I believe, and I think other people believe, that this is how systemic change is done. And I think that's what we're going to do.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Well, you know, making all council members, all 7 of us on a committee really didn't work out too well here lately, did it? With the Human Resources Committee, a council of 7. Look what happened there. The whole concept that I proposed here is a compromise that decreases our levy rate, but it also takes into account public safety by making sure they're 100% funded and making sure that the library and the Human Rights Commission get a little bit of money rather than having it taken away from them. And I see that as a compromise that adds some fees, which really, as you said, are low in the state of Iowa. And I ran also for election. And it's just unfortunate that I never had the same kind of response when I knocked on doors. Excuse me?
We will not take comments from the back.
Wow.
Please continue.
Unbelievable. I never heard that from anybody. One person, a family, approached me about how come their taxes are so high. And when I explained to them what goes in, just not in the same kind of expertise that Michelle did, but with the same kind of points as to how your tax rate is figured, you know what those people were going to do? They were going to go down to the county assessor and appeal their taxes as soon as they could. You know, that is the kind of information that's given rather than just talking about cut. Mm-hmm. You know, and your tax levy rate is something that we got to take care of. Well, if you want to believe that and if you want to go along with that, this proposal, this is a compromise that does exactly what I think the people of Waterloo want. They say, get your act together and you guys work together and come up with a solution. The solution isn't to create something where we are, in fact, going back to monies that are going to result in cuts to public safety. That's not what anybody wanted, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I think a compromise is neither raising the levy rate nor lowering the levy rate. It's right where it was. We need to deal with it. I think that doing a sneak attack tax on their gas bill and their electric bill, you know, it's just not fair. It's not fair. And it's going to hit nonprofits so hard, and it's going to be a blow to the base that everyone keeps talking about to try to get to come here. Come here and we'll punish you with a regressive tax. No, let's compromise and say no raise, no lower.
All right, Mr.
Yeah. So just to respond to Councilman Morrissey, you know, the mayor had a compromise on the unfilled positions. There was 4 firefighters and he was going to fill 2 of them. You would not compromise. Exactly. The reason you voted against it. Mm-hmm. Your proposal of the $300,000 for the fees and the $500,000 for the electric bill tax increases. That's about 42 cents. So you are increasing cost of living here. Whether you call it, I take $1 out of this pocket, out of my fee pocket, or I take $1 out of my tax pocket, it's costing me to live here. And so you're increasing the cost 42 cents. So let's be honest. That's why I said, you know, let's compromise something that makes sense for all of us. So to say that you're lowering taxes is not being truthful, Councilman.
Mr. Mayor, in addressing Councilman from Second Ward's statements, I never said that, that I was lowering taxes. What I was saying was that the levy rate is coming down, and it's a balanced approach, which is what we decided on in our strategic plan, right, Mr. Schmidt?
Mr. Mayor,
Finished.
are you done?
No.
Okay.
No. So what this is doing, we aren't increasing taxes. We're talking about fees. And for anybody in this entire building to say that the cost for private utensils and the cost of living are not going up, and that the cost to run city government does not go up, to me, that's a concept that has no bearing in reality. The cost of everything that the city buys is going up. But yet at the same time, we've got this philosophy that we need to cut the cost of city services. And at the expense of cutting those city services is that those services are going to be less than what the people of Waterloo expect us to approve. Therefore, these are reasonable increases, Mr. Mayor, and it accomplishes what our strategic goal has set in front of us to do.
All right, Mr. Schmidt.
Mr. Mayor, are there any motions on the floor?
Yep, for the proposal we had. The motion, I thought we had the one that was tabled.
They voted it down.
Yeah, the resolution on the table is the levy rate of 17.4070.
That's still on the floor.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Wand, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, I just want to add, I ran for office as well this year, and I ran for the whole city. And I think I got maybe 2 or 3 people that said that they would appreciate to have their taxes reduced. But most people, and I've had people call me, a lot of people saying, please keep our same services. We're willing to pay for them. We understand costs go up, but we need to keep our services, and we want to help grow the base. They want to help the city grow and prosper. And in fact, I had one person even tell me that they thought it was a bargain living in Waterloo. So I'm not sure, you talked to different people than I did, than Pat did, but I had the overwhelming, like 98% of the people I talked to wanting us to keep the taxes where they are so that we can continue to provide the service that they want and need in order to stay in Waterloo. So I think we've got differing opinions there. I personally like the mayor's proposal and Mr. Morrissey's proposal because both were compromises. And I appreciate the effort that both of them put into coming up with those compromises. So.
Mrs. Klein.
When I asked voters, I actually went into neighborhoods that I'm not familiar with. And I actually knocked on the doors of people I did not know. And I went back twice to make sure I gave them every opportunity to talk to me. And I got to just under 6,000 houses. So when I say that my thoughts are with the little elderly lady in my ward who's on a fixed income and who is going to look at me like I have fallen off the wagon if I say to her, we're going to lower your levy rate, but your heating bills are going to go higher. I can't do it. I can't do it to the people.
Can you tell me, from the budget that I would propose, can you tell me on a $100,000 house that would decrease the tax asking? You know what the number was? And for the 0.5%, the 0.5% for the fee, the franchise fee, can anyone tell me what that equal to per resident? All right, we got a motion on here we have a motion on right now. Is there any other comment? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Schimpf,
No.
Mrs. Klein,
No.
Mr. Amos,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
No.
Mrs. Jewin,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobs,
No.
Mr. Morrissey.
Can I vote twice? I'm a good Democrat.
No.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?